It's been 4 months since Sydney FC defeated Melbourne City in the grand final at Bankwest Stadium. Well, thanks to the VAR ruining it and disallowing that Harry Delbridge goal. Seriously, that was a clear goal from Harrison Delbridge, okay? He scored in the 17th minute, disallowed because blocking the goalie's vision. Are you kidding me? Anyway, 0-0 after 90 minutes. Melbourne City should have been up 1-0, but anyway, whatever. We'll move on from that blunder because in a week's time, or in less than a week's time, the new A-League campaign starts again, starting with Western Sydney and Macarthur at Bankwest Stadium on a Sunday night. Wait, no. That game got postponed, never mind. On the Monday night, between Western United and Adelaide Reds at GMHBA Stadium. In this video today, I am going to be predicting what the A-League ladder will look like from last to first at the end of May. And that's to try and get a gauge on who are expecting to do well and who are expecting not to do well. In 12th spot, I don't have the Mariners. Instead, I have got Newcastle Jets. The psychological toll on losing their coach, half their squad, and their owner is huge. I mean, to be honest, the Jets weren't even supposed to participate in this year's... well, not supposed to, but at one point it looked like they weren't even going to participate in this year's competition. They don't have a coach, so they've got Craig Deans, who's like their interim. I think you might as well just appoint him permanently because I don't think you'll be finding a coach anytime soon. They don't have an owner, so basically all the other clubs are going to have to fund them. So there's all the off-field issues there. As a result, they've lost several key players like striker Arroyo. They've lost Petratos, who's like their biggest out. Petratos is their biggest out. They've lost Fitzgerald. They've lost Abidi. So basically their entire striking line, essentially. And they've lost Matthew Miller for a bit of the season. Hopefully for Newcastle fans, he actually comes back later, but it looks like they've got at least 5 key players out of the squad, 4 of them permanently, and their entire striking line is very inexperienced. I mean, they've only got Roy O'Donovan as their only avenue to goal. I mean, it's going to be a struggle for Newcastle to get goals. They've got an inexperienced goalkeeper, although he seemed to be doing all right at the end of last year. Italiano seemed to be doing all right, but yeah, it's I feel like there's a lot of angst at the club. There's a lot of tension. And Ugargovic, he wanted to leave the club, but was forced to stay. So I don't think he's really going to try that hard. I think he will cause a few issues. Look, there's a lot of unhappiness, unrest at Newcastle, and I can see them finishing last. In 11th spot, I've got the team that everyone likes to put last, Central Coast. Look, I do feel like their squad is weaker and more inexperienced compared to Newcastle's. I mean, I think they've got Matt Simon as their best player still. Well, apart from their new recruits. But what Central Coast do have going for them as opposed to Newcastle is a little bit more of off-field stability. Well, not in the playing squad, but at least up high. They've got Alan Stajic for a second year. Unlike Newcastle, I think they've settled on a buyer. I don't think they've signed him yet, but I think they've settled on a buyer. And look, they've got a few decent recruits. I mean, they've got Bazarnik, they've got Jankovic, Janoda. I think they'll do all right for the Mariners. Look, the rest of their side is pretty inexperienced. As I said, Matt Simon's probably their best player. Birighitti will be very important up in the goals, but he's a pretty decent goalkeeper. But apart from that, they've got a very inexperienced team. But there is some promise, given that they just got promoted. The youth team just got promoted into the New South Wales Premier League. So I think there is some positivity going on in the Mariners as opposed to the Jets, which is just pure negativity. And I feel like the Mariners are that sort of team. They'll win a few games early and then just drop off and fizz off late. I can see that happening with the Mariners. I feel like, given they're a bit more positive, I think they'll finish higher than Newcastle. In 10th spot, I've got Brisbane, which is a little bit of a hard case to make. In one case, they've got a very good defence. They've got the best goalkeeper in Jamie Young. They've got a really good defence in Aldro, Gillespie, Hingert, Brown. That's about it. They've got a very inexperienced midfield. Scott McDonald is probably their main striker, and he's only a decent player at best. He's not a leading striker. They did get a couple of Japanese imports to try and fill that hole, which might offset things. But the other issue that Brisbane have got, apart from the fact that they've lost like half their team from last year, I mean, they've lost Holloway, they've lost, what's his name? Inman, Neville. They've lost a lot of key players. And their other big issue, their fixture. Obviously, it's an uneven fixture this year. Some teams play each other twice, others 3 times. And Brisbane probably got the harshest of them all. They've got Melbourne City, Sydney, and the Wanderers to play. Especially those first 2 I said. Melbourne City and Sydney, those would be very hard matchups, and they could very well go 0-6 in them. Wanderers is an iffy one, and they play them away twice. If it's any consolation, they do play Newcastle 3 times as well. That does even the ledger a bit. But Brisbane have got probably one of the hardest fixtures. Pretty inexperienced front half of the team. I can very well see this team ending in a lot of draws, like drawing a lot of games, but I can't see him winning much. I can't see him scoring a lot of goals. They're going to have to rely heavily on their defence to win, and I don't think it's going to work out for them. Another team with a hellish draw is Adelaide United. They have to play Sydney 3 times, Wanderers 3 times, and Melbourne Victory 3 times. Now note that the latter 2 are going to be big improvers this year, especially Melbourne Victory. There's no way they're going to finish the way they did last year. As for the rest of the team, well, they've lost a lot of key players. I mean, McGree was their biggest loss up forward. They lost Izzo in their goal, so they've got a pretty inexperienced goalkeeper in there. I don't even know who is actually going to be behind the sticks, but they've lost McGree, they've lost Opes, they've lost Blackwood. So look, they're going to again rely heavily on their defence. And their midfield, they're playing out of player positions in their midfield, like Strain and Keto, their defenders, they're playing in the midfield because they don't have enough midfields. I guess their recruits have been decent. They've got Lopez and Jurek, which will probably help stabilise their front third. I feel like their squad, it's a mix of experience and youth. I feel like it's relatively a decent squad that can compete. But given the teams that they have to play 3 times, and given that half of this squad's pretty inexperienced and they've got no depth outside their starting 11, I can see Adelaide struggling, especially at the back end of the season. In 8th spot, I've got my team, Perth Glory. I'm a little bit pessimistic about them. I mean, yes, people are saying that they've got one of the best front thirds in the competition. I'll get to that in a minute. But they've got no defence whatsoever. Liam Reddy, he's out of form. I mean, we saw that last year, shipped about 15 goals in 5 games. He's really out of form at the moment. And, well, their defence, they don't even have enough depth to cover their starting 11. I mean, they've got their 2 new recruits, Lockman and Otter, okay? And then they've got Astrapodidimidis, or however you pronounce his name, and Rawlings, who have hardly played A-League football. And then below them, they've got even more debutantes like Bradford and Sullivan and all those other players, and Steins and all those other players which we've hardly heard of. So yeah, that's the issues with their defence. In the forward line, yes, we've got Keogh, Economides, Fornaroli, but Fornaroli's out of form, Economides is injured, and Keogh hasn't played for a year competitively. Kilkenny and Castro should be alright. They might stabilise it a bit, but I feel like we're going to struggle a bit. Even though we do have a softer draw compared to some of the others below us. I mean, we get to play Newcastle 3 times, Adelaide 3 times, including 2 at home, which they rarely win in Perth. But I can see us struggling for parts of the season. In 7th spot, I've got Wellington, who is probably the biggest unknown of this season. I mean, they're that sort of team that everyone writes off at the start of the season and they just, out of nowhere, become good and finish higher up on the ladder and exceed all expectations. I can clearly see that happening with Wellington this year. There's no reason why they can't. I mean, they've got a pretty decent lineup. They've got Marinkovic in the goals. They've got Davila and Hebert up forward and Ball. They've got Delvin in the midfield with Pispocco and a few others. They've got they've got some of the best young talent in the competition. One of my big concerns with Wellington, though, is the hub they're going to be in Wollongong. Look, people are concerned they're going to fizz out. I think it's going to be the opposite. I feel like they'll start slow, and once they get used to Wollongong, they'll finish off pretty quick. The other thing is their fixture. They have to play Western United and the Wanderers and someone else. And Macarthur 3 times, and those are all pretty hard triple ups to do, so there's that. Look, Wellington's a decent team, but I just feel the teams above them are better, and that's why I'm putting them in 7th. Number 6, I've got Western United. If this was about starting 11s only, Western United would be much higher on this list, but that's the thing. Outside of their top 11 people, who's there? To be honest, I have no idea. They're going to rely too heavily on Berisha, Diamante, and that new guy, Sancho. They're going to be relying a lot on them, plus their goalkeeper, Philip Kurtzler, and their defenders. Look, if this team has a really good injury run throughout the entire year, they could probably finish higher. But if they start getting injuries, and particularly they're an aging side, that is a bit of a vulnerability with them. They could find themselves potentially missing the top 6. I mean, as I said, the starting 11's good, but yeah, it could fall apart should injury strike. They haven't really recruited a lot of people. They've recruited Wales and Sancho, which is good, but apart from that, there hasn't been a lot of recruits, although they haven't exactly lost that much either. Double ups against Macarthur and Wellington are always going to be tough, but the bonus, they get to play the Mariners 3 times. In 5th spot, we've got everyone's least favourite team, and the team we all hope finishes in the pit of fire. That's the Western Sydney Wanderers. Seriously, Carl Robinson is sly. After what was looking to be a pretty quiet off-season, only getting Dorrans and a few other fringe players, they made a splash. They stole Gordon, they stole Abini, and they stole Troy Issy off 3 different victim clubs. And all of a sudden, they've got a decent, but not very talented starting 11. But, hold on. Who is that in power? It's Carl Robinson, okay? He will find a way to make that pretty average starting 11 become very good, okay? He did that with Newcastle. They were pretty crap at one point. Came in. Newcastle probably should have... I would have been tipping him premiers if he was still there. Just shows how much they've fallen since Robinson left. I feel like they've got probably the best coach in the competition, and I feel like the Wanderers are going to produce some massive upsets. And if the RBB comes back, if Bankwest Stadium gets up and running again, then the Wanderers are going to be a pretty scary proposition at home. Furthermore, they get to play Brisbane 3 times, they get to play Adelaide 3 times, and Wellington, who, while decent or average, they should snag some wins off these. Despite having probably the worst draw in the competition, I'm sticking with my guns and saying Melbourne Victory will finish 4th. They are going to be the big improvers of this year. They're not going to finish 10th again. Grant Bergner, he seems to be decent. They did pretty well in the Champions League, and it shows that they will be a threat this year. They've got one of the scariest front thirds in the competition with Rojas, Cruz, and their new recruit Jestede. Plus, they've also recruited Butterfield and McNanaman, who in the Champions League showed that they were pretty good. And even Brimmer showed some pretty good signs that he'll be a good player at Victory. I guess maybe their weakness will be their defence. They've got about Storm Rooks and Lee Broxham. And aside from that, it's pretty inexperienced. And their goalkeeper, Kakombe, while he was doing pretty well in the Champions League, especially having to hold off Sol for about 50 minutes, he's still lacking that experience, and we don't know how good he'll be. Look, their defence might be an issue, but I think overall, if they flood the goals, which I think they will, I think Melbourne Victory can even get over some of these held triple ups. They play Sydney, Western United, and Melbourne City 3 times. Honestly, I don't even know why I'm putting them this high, but on paper, they look like one of the best teams in the competition. I don't think they're going to finish as low as they did last year again. In 3rd spot, I've got Macarthur, and yes, they've got a very good starting 11. I mean, who have they recruited? They've recruited Franich, Meredith, Sunsa, Saseta, Expeterio, or whatever you pronounce it, or Derbyshire. And they've even got goalkeeper in Federici. They have got a lot of good players on their list. They've got depth. They've got a lot of Spanish, French, international talent on their team. Probably one of the best defences one of the most scariest attacks, and probably the best midfield. They've got a very good team, Macarthur. There isn't a lot that could go wrong with them, apart from probably the fact that they're an aging team. They recruited a lot of 30-year-olds. I think that'll be their only downfall. They've got a pretty soft draw. They get to play the Mariners 3 times, as well as Wellington and Perth. I think Western United will be their hardest one, but even that, I think they'll get some wins there. Yeah, it's going to be a very good year for Macarthur. And I'm looking forward to see what they can do, actually. In second spot, I've got Sydney FC, who are the most stable club in the competition. They've only lost one key player, well, albeit their best player in Adam Lafondra, but still, I think Sydney will still do very well regardless. I mean, they're settled in defence, they're settled in midfield, they're settled in the forward line as well. Well, I think relatively. I think Bahaja will do well. Barbarousis, if he gets back to his best, I think he'll kick a few more goals in the absence of Lafondre. Bahaja did well in the Champions League. I think he'll do just as well there. And Sydney FC, what they have that every other team doesn't have is depth. They've got players which are good enough to make the starting 11 on any other team, but they're on the bench for Sydney FC. They've got about 15 first-choice players, and they've only got 11 spots. So, yeah, selection headaches at Sydney, I feel like they're going to go a long way. The only reason why I've got them lower than Melbourne City is because of the fixture. Remember, Sydney FC do still have to play the Wanderers and Melbourne 3 times, but listen who Melbourne City have to play 3 times and you'll be spewing. Seriously, did the FFA get mixed up with Melbourne Victory and Melbourne City? Did they think it was Victory that reached the grand final and Melbourne City which finished 10th? Because whilst Victory have got all the good teams 3 times, Melbourne City, listen to this, they've got Central Coast 3 times, they've got Newcastle 3 times, and they've got Brisbane 3 times, as well as Melbourne, but that's like 3 of the bottom teams who were expecting to struggle the most, and they get 3 scalps at them. That's 9 free wins there. I'm not even joking. That's 27 points already before you even go into the other matchups. So this is why I think Melbourne City will finish top. Well, not just that. They've got a very good team with McLaren up front. And look, they were grand finalists last year. They haven't really lost a lot, and they haven't really gained a lot either. But they got Andrew Naboo. So yeah, that'll be a pretty good attacking combination up there. Atkinson returned surprisingly. But yeah, they've got a lot of players, which I'm not going to mention now, but they've got a pretty good lineup which can match Sydney FC on any day. And they've got a piss-easy draw. I can see and also remember, Sydney FC, if the situation with COVID gets worse, they might be forced into a hub. That might play an advantage into Melbourne City here. So yeah, that's why I think Melbourne City will finish first. So, those are my A-League ladder predictions for 2021. Hope you liked the video. Please like, please subscribe, please comment what you think of the video down below, and who you think, how do you think the A-League ladder will pan out? Because I've been trying to look for a lot of articles and forums on other people's opinions on the ladder predictions. Haven't seen a lot of them, so I'll be interested to see what other people think. So comment your predictions down below, check out some of my other videos, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.